Hi folks, welcome to Scholar About Tarot. Just call me Mayfield, and thanks a ton for stopping by the study space. Exciting news, I have been summoned. Nobody tagged me or anything, but Cody from Tarot Readings from a Bitch had recently posted a video called Questions for People Who Don't Personify Their Decks. And hey, I'm people who don't personify my decks, so it sounds like she has some questions for me, so let's go ahead and just kind of dive right in. The original video, of course, is in the description, as well as a couple other relevant videos. Let's get the show on the road. I too brought notes. This is gonna be a second. Okay, so basically here's our agenda. I'm gonna tackle Cody's questions as concisely as possible, in the most direct way that I can. I'll share some additional thoughts as well, mainly on like the framework and language. And then I'll be a little bit more vulnerable about the danger is a strong word, but for lack of a better term, the dangers of personifying decks for me. But first thing is first. I wanted to comment really quickly. Yeah, I don't know where the whole shaming tarot personification came from. In her video, she refers to it as smugness. And I really hope that that's not something that I've done on my channel, at least not on purpose. I do recognize that I have a tone problem. It is a thing that I'm gonna be working on for the rest of my life. Really no shame to anybody who does personify their decks. It's really up to you on how you want to navigate your collection and navigate your practice as well. And it's technically not hurting anyone, not that I know of. It's truly not a big deal with how you want to navigate your tarot collection, whether it does mean assigning a little bit of a personality to your deck. If it makes it interesting, it makes it interesting. Or maybe it just makes it easier. I think honestly the smugness is, in short, the smugness is probably coming from, you know, that I'm not like other girls type of energy. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Alright, so for the first question that I took note of, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here because I did notice that she was struggling a little bit to get this question out, and I totally understand why that would be, because this is a hard question to ask. So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, Cody asks, how do you get a reading if you don't see the meaning or divine connection in the cards through personifying your decks? And I think she's asking, furthermore, I think she's asking, like, how do you not sense an energy from a deck, I guess? And I think almost immediately when she asked this question, I thought that, you know, meaning doesn't equal personhood. Art can still absolutely have meaning without the added layer of personifying it. Whatever you can see is what you can interpret. Evolution. Destruction. Daddy. This question honestly reminded me of a question that I often get whenever I tell someone that I'm an atheist. They'll be like, I mean, it's one of the common questions that atheists will usually get. It's, you know, if you don't believe in God, like, how do you determine, like, what's, like, the difference between the right and wrong? Or another variation of it is, like, how can you have morals if you don't believe in God? And I'm over here like, Jessica, if you really need God to be a good person, then for all of our sakes, please keep believing in him. Sorry, it's not that serious, but it just reminded me of that a little bit. Furthermore, it should be noted that tarot is incredibly systemic. Each suit has a meaning, each number has a meaning, each major has a meaning, so it should be pretty accessible for people who don't really personify their decks to still be able to give a good reading. There's a structure to the cards that allows anyone with a curiosity to learn to be able to pick up a deck and learn how to interpret the text. Question 2, do I work with crystals? I do not, but I do get gifted them all of the time. Please stop. I'm drowning in rocks that I don't know what to do with. Okay, that's not completely true. I mean, some of them are pretty and very much so like tarot. Each of them does have like like a definitive meaning. Like you can look in a book of crystals and read what that meaning is. Like it's not all purely intuitive, and they can actually be helpful in terms of like using them as a talisman in a psychological sense. Like if I were to wear like a rose quartz bracelet, I would do that primarily to remind myself to pick kindness in difficult situations or in places that I don't really want to be. That's just an example. I used to do this when I worked in retail. I don't anymore, so I don't need the bracelet, or I feel like I don't need the bracelet. Well, yeah, I mean, that just makes my point that meaning doesn't always mean personhood. These last few questions I actually did explore in my tarot and practice video, but I'll still give them like a pretty brief answer here. The next question is, why do you have multiple decks? Honestly, just a variety of different art styles. I do like variety, so being able to pick whatever I want to be able to read with, depending on my mood for the art, is yeah, basically the benefit to having a collection. I will, however, admit that I haven't really felt the need to incorporate anything else into my collection. Everything that I've gotten within the last month or so has been just pre-orders and Kickstarter campaigns that are just coming on in, but I haven't really worked too much with them, or at least I feel like I haven't really needed to. And also, it's a very convenient way to collect art. 78 pieces in a single package? Freaking sold. Okay, I put these two questions together just because I thought that that was more convenient. But basically Cody's asking, and I lost it immediately. Oh, here it is. What is your framework of belief and what does your practice look like? It's a good segue to hearing the rest of my thoughts. So the short answer is utility. I see tarot as a text and technology. This is a book to me, a build your own adventure, so to speak. I also think that we're kind of confusing belief with ritual to a certain extent. Like, I know those things are very overlapped, but there's like an exercise with ritual, and sometimes that doesn't always align with belief. And I do think that it must needs be remarked that ritual can sometimes have a function, or had a function once upon a time before it became a little bit more performative. For example, like, is it really bad luck to buy your own tarot deck? No, but if I do buy my own tarot deck, then that's gonna encourage me to buy more tarot decks that I probably don't need. So instead I'll just wait it out until somebody buys me one. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You know what I mean? I don't actually know if that's the origin of that superstition, but you'd be surprised. Sometimes superstitions and beliefs and rituals specifically, like, they came from a much more mundane reason. Whenever I look at a tarot deck, I think of the themes, I think of its art, I think of the artist's argument or what have you, as well as the experience and memories that I might have had with them. And yes, those things might actually clash together, making what you might call a personality. But my gut instinct wants to deconstruct that habit, for lack of a better term, mainly because I'm very sensitive to the possibility that I'm just projecting. A good example is my 5-cent tarot. 5-cent tarot by Madame Clara. I have never had a good experience with this deck. I typically don't get all that good readings from it. I'm not 100%, well, at first I wasn't 100% sure why. It would have been easy for me to just write it off as a mean bitch deck. I don't know. But I wanted to figure out why I was having such a bad time. I guess, for lack of a better term, connecting with the deck, or getting readings that made me want to reach for it more. And I know that you don't always get a good reading when you're doing your tarot practice, but this is just a situation where I was just not having a good time. And so this is an animal deck. You are going to see some reversals because this is when I was trying to use reversals, and that was one of the, I guess, problems with my experience here, because this is one of the few decks that I will actually be open to reading reversals for because of the keywords. And that's the other thing that's a factor here. The keywords aren't always the most positive, or they're not always something that I would read with. I think what happens with the 5-cent tarot is that I disagree with it, because I don't really know how to stretch what it's telling me into the context of my spread. And I think that's where the disconnect is, because I could easily be like, this is just not a nice deck and I just don't want to interact with it or something like that. No, I want to be able to fix what's going on and see if I can read with it a different way, or maybe just straight up ignore the keywords. Because with my next example, let me put this off to the side, I have the Ritual Abuse Tarot by Ryan Sheffield. This is a horrifying looking deck. Truly gruesome and creepy to look at. But it gives me the nicest messages whenever I do use it. Now, is this just a kind deck? I mean, it maybe not. I don't know. Technically, like, my experience with it is overall positive, and yet it looks like this. Yeah, does that give this deck a sweet personality? Not really. It just means that I had overall good experiences with it. And for a really long time, this was one of the only decks that I would use for up to months at a time. So it's only natural that I would have most likely positive experiences with it, especially after work or something like that. And also, I was reading with it without the guidebook. The guidebook comes in like a PDF format, and I remember skimming through the guidebook, and so many of the cards just have the most negative messages, and that just tells me that maybe it could have been a negative experience if I paid more attention to the guidebook. But no, I paid more attention to honestly just the name on the card. So 5 of Swords or the Chariot. A lot of the times I would just kind of soak up the art, just because it was an entertaining thing to do, because that's what I got it for. It's based off of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So yeah, of course I would have a lot of fun with this deck. Because of the abrasiveness of the 5-cent tarot and the compassion of the Ritual Abuse, I mean, I assigned them to be my career deck and my self-care deck, respectively. That reminds me. Let me go ahead and admit to you that all of this is pure semantics. I specifically remember Dawn Michelle having the same conversation in her video, how she assigns her decks. Yeah, how I assign a deck, and in like parentheses it says, and you know, how to personify my decks or whatever. I recognized really rather quickly that we are all sharing kind of the same experience to a certain extent. Let me go ahead and read to you my comments that I left verbatim. Personally, I try not to personify my decks too much. I view my decks as text first, tech second. I learn more about the deck's thesis and or argument, if it has one, and then I'll assign it to whatever I would want to use it for. And of course, that assignment can change at any time. I plan to talk about this more in depth someday, but the Zombie Tarot, for example, is a Cold War text. I use it for tense situations that need a little lightening up or smoothing over, although I've had a hard time reaching for it in the last few weeks based off of current events. It seems like we, including lots of folks in the comments, use similar approaches, but different language, which I can very much appreciate. So basically, I think it kind of doesn't matter whether we personify our decks or not. And I recognize that Cody said multiple times that she doesn't care. And honestly, that's the right attitude. Yeah, that's basically the right attitude, because I mean we're all in the same storm pretty much. It's just the way that we talk about tarot just might differ for different reasons. So on that note, I guess we can go ahead and Pascal's wager this conversation. What do I have to lose by personifying my decks if it's all just the same thing? If my approach to my collection is quite similar to others, well, what do I have to lose by leaning in? And for me, there are dangers and reservations about doing that, and I'll go ahead and talk to you about why I don't personify my decks for a slightly different reason, aside from belief, or lack thereof, I guess. Earlier, I might have mentioned that I really have more of a problem with anthropomorphizing decks, not so much personifying it. And for me, personifying a tarot deck can get into that dangerous territory of anthropomorphizing it. I believe the difference is personifying it, you give it like a couple characteristics or whatever, but for anthropomorphizing a tarot deck, that deck is now a person. She's angry when she doesn't get some sun. I don't know. Not only can one develop an attachment that makes it harder to call a collection, but that's when things can get really weird. I will say one thing that I do find kind of cringe about specifically anthropomorphizing tarot decks, and it's all on the tarot subreddit. I really need to get off Reddit, you guys. When people anthropomorphize their cards, like I've seen different posts on the tarot subreddit that start with, "Do my cards not like me?" Or, "Is my deck haunted? Is my deck trying to tell me something by always dropping a Page of Cups?" I don't know. And that's when things get odd. And this might be an unpopular opinion, but I think that's maybe when to set a little bit of a boundary. I sincerely believe that those people maybe need space from their collections. Not because they see personhood in their tarot deck, but because the way that they are written and the way that they're anthropomorphizing their cards makes it seem that there might be something else divorced from witchcraft that might need some attention. And I should know, I am riddled with neurodivergence, and I need to be careful with how I work with tarot and draw boundaries with what I do with it. So I guess in some ways, tarot can also be a drug that needs to be taken with caution. On a lighter note, with regards to the smugness, I did want to talk a little bit more about that, because that is really fascinating to me. I'm surprised that that's still even a thing. I know earlier I said, it might just be like that, not like other girls energy. That's actually kind of the same energy that you might get from people who are like, yeah, I don't do fortune telling type of thing. In this context, however, I think there could also be an element of not feeling that sense of belonging. Personally, I feel like a total poser when I try to engage with any type of actual ritual within witchcraft, trying to follow the rules, as I would probably say. I don't even call myself a witch, to be honest. I wouldn't do that on camera anytime soon, nor would I do that in when I meet someone and tell them that I'm a tarot reader or something like that, or that I can read for them, and they'll be like, "Oh, cool, so you're a witch?" And I'm like, "No." And it's not like I'm distancing myself necessarily, it's just a discomfort of being called that, because I don't really practice like it, and I also don't quite look like it. And maybe that's just a me thing that I still have to work out. but I'm not a witch until someone else tells me. So yeah, it's probably just a cope. Is really what I'm trying to say. Oh, that got a little dark there. So yeah, I hope these answers gave you some insight, Cody, and to anyone else who is interested in further perspectives. I appreciate all of the questions. We welcome good faith questions here, and we welcome confusion here on ScholarBot. What kind of educator would I be if I didn't allow that on this channel? This is how we learn. Please feel free to continue the conversation in the comments. Please be sure to make discourse, not war. Thanks again to Cody for asking such fantastic questions, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!